welcome to Vital Wisdom with me, Dr. Eli Camp. This is the place where I talk about the body's incredible ability to heal itself. When it has what it needs, nothing is poisoning it, and we've stimulated that innate healing ability. We call this practice of medicine vitalism, and there are many, many, many types of practitioners out there who follow this paradigm of medicine. Today, I'm going to talk to you about water. So there are a few cornerstones we believe in medicine, in life, in living, that lead a body to optimal health, to create a body that can thrive and then function as it was designed, which is as a self-healing organism. Your body can heal itself, but we have to assist it and not fight it, not suppress symptoms, not cut pieces and parts of it out when they could be restored to health. And one of the really important things that we have to pay attention to is how we are hydrating our body. Now, as always, the information I give you on this podcast is for educational purposes, and it is not designed to be taken as medical diagnosis or treatment, and it should not be used in the place of the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider. And if you have questions about your own personal health, reach out to your healthcare provider promptly. All right. I'm going to talk about a number of things in this particular episode: water in the human body, talk a little bit about dehydration and how to prevent it, the quantity and quality of water, tips for drinking more water, best choices for clean water, and hydrotherapy, because water as medicine is not only good inside the body, but it's also good outside the body. So water is the body's most basic and fundamental chemical component. 60 to 70% of the human body is made up of water, and every system in the body depends on water for many things: chemical reactions, just a number of things. We'll go over those in a minute. Water is absorbed into the human body from the stomach and the large intestine. And Thales, who was a 6th century Greek philosopher, he regarded water as the fundamental building block of life. And without it, there's no life. And I agree. Even Aristotle regarded water as one of the 4 primary elements. It has always held a very important place until recently, when folks, I think, out to make a buck and selling all of these liquids for people to buy, and then hence the company makes money, have forgotten the importance of water. And not only the importance of water, but the importance of quality water, clean water. There's a lot of stuff being sold out there on the market that does less good and more harm because of what it contains. Every human needs water. All the animals on our planet, most of them, there's a few that do better in a low water environment, but just a few. Plants need water. Even the desert plants, they need some water, and all the rest of them need a lot of water. And how much water we take in, or our hydration status, affects how our body works, how well it works in the daily activities. It affects how prone we are to injury and how well we recover from injury and illness. Water facilitates hundreds, probably thousands of critical functions in the body, including cellular reactions. And many of these are essential for maintaining good muscle tone, joint mobility, managing pain, clear thinking, proper digestion, proper elimination, good sleep, and the list goes on and on and on. Water helps us detoxify toxins from vital organs, and it helps carry nutrients to our cells. It helps regulate body temperature through perspiration. If we don't have enough water and we're dehydrated, it's difficult for us to perspire. It facilitates the muscle contractions. It helps remove waste through digestive and urinary system. It protects joints with fluids that cushion movement. It lubricates eyes, nose, throat, mouth, and other mucous tissues. It dissolves and transports nutrients, minerals, and vitamins, and the movement of oxygen-rich blood through the body. So it is an important substance, and it is worthy of our attention to it in our daily diet, in our daily activity, in our daily going-ons about. One of the things that I often do when people come in to see me is we determine if they're dehydrated, even chronically dehydrated. And there's lots of definitions out there for dehydration. One of the most common is a condition. Dehydration is a condition that occurs when the loss of body fluids, mostly water, exceeds the amount that is taken in. That's severe dehydration. We can be in a state of chronic dehydration, and it could be that we are losing as much as we're taking in. It could be that for each individual person, the level of hydration that's needed is different because we're all individuals and our bodies all work differently. So basically, we want to have enough water to perform all the basic functions optimally, and we can't do that when we're dehydrated. And there's lots of reasons why we can become dehydrated. So certain activities speed up dehydration, like working outside in hot weather, exercising, doing things that cause our body to perspire, having a fever, vomiting, diarrhea, increased urination due to infection or medications. And some health conditions, like just as an example, diabetes can cause the risk of dehydration. So we want to make sure that when we are engaged or things are happening where we have the potential to lose water from our body, we're particularly paying attention to that. And then just in general, on a daily basis, that we are making sure that we are staying hydrated enough. And primarily, the cause of dehydration is not consuming enough water. And I say consuming because you can get water through drinking it, you can get water through eating it, and of course, in some situations, we can get rehydrated through IV. How do you know if you're dehydrated? Well, serious dehydration, the symptoms are pretty obvious. We have increased thirst, dry mouth, swollen tongue, weak and dizzy, and headaches. And something that's, I think, worth mentioning is dehydration is not necessarily just the loss of water, but when we have that imbalance, we also see an imbalance in the body's mineral and electrolyte function because we have to have water as a medium for those things. When we stay in kind of a chronic state of dehydration, even if mild, we can develop what looks like chronic illness, like headaches and muscle pain, fatigue, mood changes, poor GI functions, and more. So I would say 7 out of 10 patients that I've seen in my career, so 70% of people, are in some state of dehydration, and simply getting good, clean, quality water into them, rehydrating them, helps with a number of symptoms that they often come in complaining of. And they're not complaining of, but experiencing. And it could have been things for years and years and years, right? This can go on for a really, really long time. How much water do we need? That would be my most logical next question if I was talking to someone about dehydration. And it varies by person, right? How much water our body needs to perform optimally and be at its healthiest varies. And it's based on things like body mass, body temperature, activity level, our general state of health, if we have pre-existing conditions, the environment we're in. In other words, what might be sufficient for one person may not be enough for another, and what might be sufficient for one person might be too much for another. In general, on average, most people lose about 2.5 liters of water per day through urine, stool, perspiring, and breathing. That's a lot. I mean, think about a 1 liter bottle of anything, because I know we've all bought liter bottles of some kind of drink out there. We lose 2.5 of those per day on average. Some people lose more, some people use less. A common rule of thumb is the 8 glasses of 8 ounces of water per day to try and take that in. 8 glasses of 8 ounces. However, that is going to be modified by a number of things, right? It can be modified by your exercise level. If you are exercising and perspiring during hot and humid weather, during illness, during breastfeeding and pregnancy, you may need to increase that even more. So 8 glasses of 8 ounces of water per day is about 2 liters. And the Institute of Medicine advises men consume 3 liters or 13 cups of water, and that women consume about 2.2 liters or 9 cups of water per day on average. Is that, do you get that all through water? No, there are foods that are high in water. And that's a quick Google search. What foods are high in water? And it'll tell you how much water a serving of that food gives you. And remember, I've recommended a number of times that you consider creating an account at Cronometer, Crono meter, Cronometer. They have a free account. They also have a paid account with bells and whistles. But the free account is sufficient because you can track not only your food and what you eat and therefore the nutrition you're getting every day, but you can also track your water in there. If you're not getting enough and you are staying in a state of dehydration, it really means that your body lacks the water required to function at its optimal level. If you don't replace the fluids that you've lost through exercise or exposure to elements or however it is you're losing your water, and we all do, then you're in a state of mild to moderate to severe dehydration. And if you take in a lot of caffeine, this also helps dehydrate your body because caffeine acts as a diuretic. The other things that alter how much water a human needs to take in our age. We certainly, little ones don't need 2 liters of water a day. Not little ones. They don't, right? I mean, they don't need that much. And there's great guidelines online on how much water does my kid need or does my elderly parent need. Age also changes the amount we need, how active you are, what your body composition is. If you're somebody who perspires a lot, and there's a whole set of humans that have high perspiration levels, you're losing more water. What your health status is, and of course, climate. So people who live in Arizona, out in the desert, and they're outside, they're losing a lot more water than someone who lives up north where it's cold and they're not perspiring as much. The color of your urine isn't necessarily an accurate guide of your hydration level. I have people tell me all the time, well, my urine's really pale. I heard that when you're dehydrated, it becomes a dark yellow or even orange and it smells. Okay, well, if you've gotten to that state, you're really dehydrated. But the color of your urine, it shouldn't be used as an accurate guide. Food, supplements, medications, these can all change the color of urine and the smell. So I like to take a person and with an average physical exertion level and nothing unique that would make them lose more urine than average. I tell folks to drink about 1/2 of their body weight in ounces. So if you weigh 100 pounds, then you're going to drink 50 ounces of water each day. You weigh 150 pounds, you're going to drink 75 ounces of water each day, and you're going to change that amount based on what you eat. So if you have a high water intake through food, you don't have to drink as much. And if you expend a lot of water because of how you live or where you live, then you're going to take in a little bit more water. So that's my general rule of thumb with people. It's a good place to start. Severe dehydration can quickly become life-threatening. And you might think, oh, I'm not at risk of severe dehydration, but let's talk about the levels of dehydration. So mild dehydration, which many, many, many people have, include a dry mouth and irritability, headaches, and muscle cramps. A moderate dehydration have all of those plus dizziness. They can be clumsy, exhausted, a racing heartbeat. Urination might be decreased. They might have trouble standing or even focusing their eyes. Severe dehydration requires medical intervention, usually and often in the form of an IV. It's all of the things I've mentioned, plus the function of vital organs is impaired, and without getting hydration into someone, without them becoming hydrated, they can enter a coma and die. So you might imagine that folks would just drink more water, but there are many reasons why they don't. They get busy. They don't like the taste of just water. They don't necessarily have access to clean drinking water all day long. And so I developed strategies over the years to help my patients drink more water. So one of the easiest ways is to carry a water bottle, a big one, so that you have easy access when you're at work, when you're running errands, when you're in the car, and what you drink out of. So keep in mind that plastic water containers, so those great bottles of water that are everywhere, are often made with polyethylene terephthalate, and that's PET, or bisphenol A, which is BPA. And these can leak harmful chemicals into your drinking water. So I encourage my folks, and we personally use stainless steel, but you can also use glass jars. You can get canning jars, quart canning jars, or they do make some very high density polyethylene containers. They're my least favorite, but they're not quite as dangerous as the other ones. I'll tell you a story before I go on with tips for getting more water. Back in 1986, 1987, I was in Germany. My husband and I were in Germany. He was military. And we were travel bugs. We've always loved every free minute to jump in the car and just go explore, go see our planet and meet new people and see what there is to see. And we were in Germany, we were driving on the Autobahn, and we had to stop and get some gasoline. And on the Autobahn, they have these little quick pullouts, right, where you can get fuel so you don't run out of fuel and cause all kinds of problems on the Autobahn. And they have, they had little shops there, like our convenience stores, but much smaller and with just like the basic stuff. And one day we were on a trip and we stopped and I wanted water. And we walked into the little shop, no water. They didn't even have cups that I could get water from their tap. And I said to my husband, someday somebody is going to start selling water in bottles and they're going to make $1 million. And he laughed at me. He said, nobody's going to pay money for a bottle of water. And I was like, I'm telling you, they will. And don't you know, when we got back to the States, so just a few years after that, we started to see the bottles of water appear on the shelf, the most amazing thing, and in Europe as well. But uh, what your bottle is made out of is important. Some people have asked me, well, if I'm out and about and I don't have water with me, is it better to not drink water or buy one of those plastic bottles of water? And, I think our body can detoxify. And so I would always say to them, if you're thirsty and you're afraid you're getting dehydrated, drink the water. And then, we can do some detox herbs and, try and get your body cleaned out the best we can. But the easiest thing to do is carry water with you. Choosing water instead of sugar sweetened beverages. This helps increase water and cut calories. I mean, oh, that's a whole other episode. What manufacturers are putting on the shelves for consumers to buy. There's so much poison out there, like literally. Like it doesn't have to be poison that makes you fall down and die as soon as you consume it. There's other ways to poison people. But these sugar sweetened beverages or sugar-free stuff that is made with all these artificial sweeteners, these things are not good for us. They aren't good for us. And in some cases, especially the ones with artificial sweeteners, they're very dangerous for our nervous system. So whenever you have the option to choose water, you can do things like add lemon, lime to it. You can grow stevia in a little pot in your house or in your backyard, peppermint, and throw a stevia leaf or a peppermint leaf, in the water. You can add other fruit flavors. You can add, to 8 ounces of water, you could add an ounce of fresh squeezed orange juice or watermelon or lemon. Well, I already said lemon, but you could put sliced strawberries, blueberries, cucumbers. Like you can flavor your water and you can flavor it with real food. When you go out to eat, eating out, now this becomes a little tricky because many restaurants are just on municipal tap water, but almost all restaurants have like the glass bottled sparkling water and things like that, which doesn't cost any more than getting a glass of Coca-Cola. So choosing water instead of other beverages when eating out, that increases your water intake and helps save money and reduces calories and all that stuff as well. If you like it sweet, which so many people do, so many humans, it's almost like we were programmed to be drawn to sweet in some way, which has probably kept certain generations of people alive, that drive to get something sweet into us. If you don't really, if that's it, like that you need to drink something sweet, there's a few other ways. You could do coconut water. It's rich in natural electrolytes and it can help boost your hydration status. Adding the fruit, of course, stuff like that. Doing bubbly, sparkling spring water. That can hit the spot, but don't get the kind with sweeteners in them. Have an herbal tea, so naturally caffeine-free herbs. There's a lot of them, and you can look them up. Iced or hot, they count towards your water intake. And if you're really strategic about it, you can choose herbs that are also helping heal you on some level and restore health to your body. You can also, like I said, do this through fruit. So lots of fruits and veggies have a high water and nutrient content like cantaloupe, honeydew, watermelon, strawberries, pineapples, peaches, cucumbers, lettuce, celery. These are high in water. And if you don't want to use Cronometer, you can just look up how much water does this amount of this food give me, and then you can calculate that up to see how much you're getting through food. All right. Now I want to move on to what's in our water before you just go turn on your tap and start drinking glasses and glasses of water. The quality of the water that we're drinking has to be considered. So I'm going to go over a few stats with you. I'll try and make them not boring. And these come from the following sources: Harvard Health, the USDA, the Carey Institute, and the Environmental Working Group. So I'm not making any of this up. It's not my nature to make it up. So in 2024, and I'm talking to you in January of 2025. So in 2024, it was found through all of these sources that more than 22 million people, 22 million people, you're probably one of them, I likely was one of them, drank water that contained illegal levels of contaminants. From where? Our tap. When we're out and about at a restaurant, when we drink from the water fountain in the public park. Like 22 million people drank water that contained illegal levels of contaminants. A bottled water. They tested bottled water. That was statistic number one. Number two, one of every 3 water systems that operated year-round in the US, one of every 3, violated federal drinking water laws. Now, you might say, oh, that can't be. They would shut them down. No. It's not like there's enough inspectors and personnel with these organizations that are supposed to be looking out for us to go and test every single tap. So it might leave the water treatment plant. Now, there are many times it leaves the water treatment plant and it wasn't good to start with. But even if it was okay to start with when it left the plant, it travels through pipes, many, many pipes. And by the time it comes out of our tap, it is no longer considered safe. It's contaminated. Enough to kill us? Well, in some cases, yes. Public drinking water contains more than 1,000 contaminants. Organic chemicals like pesticides, solvents, arsenic, benzene, organic chemicals in our public drinking water. That includes the tap in your home, in restaurants, in like the water that's supplied by the public utilities. It contains inorganic chemicals such as lead, mercury, nitrates, those are the bad ones. Iron and zinc can, in some forms and some amounts, be great, the iron. Microbes like viruses, coliform bacteria, giardia. Why are we not all running around with the constant runs? Because the human body was designed to combat these things to some degree. So the healthier you are, the less problems that those microbes cause, but it doesn't mean you're not getting exposed to them. Just like in the air or in the food you eat or the air we breathe, they're everywhere, right? Radioactive contaminants like radon. And this is the really, really concerning one to me. I'm going to talk more about it in a second. Pharmaceuticals. They only screen for certain things. But when they take a sample and they look at everything they can possibly test for, this is when they start to find that public drinking water contains more than 1,000 contaminants. Okay. The IPA has set legal limits or maximum contaminant levels for only 40 of the 1,000 contaminants. EPA, sorry. For only 40 of the 1,000 contaminants. 40. That leaves 960 that we don't even know how much of any of those should be present. Number 5, even though lead levels may be within the EPA's MCL is maximum contaminant level, may be within the EPA's MCL. Remember, like I said, this is the measurement taken at the plant. On the way to the tap, it goes through pipes and fixtures and past solder and all this stuff. So one of the things, if I have someone who simply does not have the means to do anything but drink tap water, I tell them to let their water run for at least 2 minutes. Make sure it's cold before drinking or cooking with it. And then, I try and get them to use some type of filtration system. Find out whether your water is from surface water, like a river or a lake, or groundwater. And you can simply call your local municipality and find out. Why? Because surface water contains higher letters of these contaminants like chloroform. Your utilities, water utility, is required to monitor levels of volatile organic chemicals. These are called VOCs, but they're unregulated, meaning the EPA hasn't established any of the maximums so they're not forced to reduce them or keep them down. They monitor them. What are some examples? 1,2-dibromo, 3-chloropropane, 1,2-dichloroethylene. Okay, man, why should we be taking these organic chemicals into our body? And volatile organic chemicals can do some bad stuff. They can. Now, number 8, if you're on a well or your utility serves fewer than 3,300 people, consider getting your water tested and make sure you take it to a certified lab. If you live near an industrial plant of any kind, the EPA has a toxic release phone number you can call. It's 202-382-3531. And they'll tell you what chemicals that industrial plant uses. And I'll tell you, to date, there hasn't been a single water source near an industrial plant that does not contain at least one and often more of the chemicals used by that industrial plant. Let that sink in for a minute. How about this? Number 10. This is the scariest thing to me. No federal agency approves water treatment units. How about that? That should give us all pause. Fluoride. I know some people are all about get fluoride in the water, and some people are all about it's a poison, get it out of the water. I'm in the latter camp. Fluoride should not be in our water. There's a lot of other things we can do to keep teeth healthy, like proper diet, proper cleaning, sugar. Like, there's so many things we can do. And there's a huge concern amongst folks who follow the quality of drinking water. There's a lot of great organizations doing that. And one of their big concerns is fluoride. It occurs naturally in the air and water to some extent, but higher concentrations of it occur as industrial byproducts of aluminum and fertilizer manufacturing. And one of the most perplexing, so fluoride is not an FDA-approved drug. And this is interesting. It's not an FDA-approved drug, and yet it's more toxic than lead, and it's routinely added to public water supplies. So there are a few really good books, and I apologize, I didn't look those books up. I might mention them on the next episode at the beginning. There's a couple of books that were written by very, very good people. They did their research. They can support everything that they claim. And one of the ideas is that at some point, these byproducts, right, from aluminum and fertilizer manufacturing produce so much waste that there was no way they could get rid of it except by getting it added to the public water. There's a number of states in our country who have outlawed fluoride, a number of counties within other states that have outlawed fluoride being added, and a lot of talk with this administration change here in 2025 to completely remove fluoride. Well, I don't know what those industries are going to do with that. I mean, it takes us all the way back to the problem way back when they had to get the Dental Association on board to say, yeah, we need fluoride. It helps prevent cavities. So we have to ask ourselves, why is fluoride being added to water if it's toxic? The US and Canada first began adding fluoride to public water supplies in 1945 and 1946. And there was this scientific theory behind fluoridation that because fluoride is a negatively charged atom, that it combines with positively charged atoms like calcium, and it becomes a more solid molecule, and that it's believed that exposure to this helps remineralize teeth that have been broken down by bacteria and poor diet and things like that. So their levels were set by the US Department of Health and Human Services, saying what levels of fluoride can be used safely. But despite the potential benefit, it is still known, it's scientifically sound to say that in certain doses, fluoride is toxic to the body. And studies have shown that fluoride can lower IQ, produce dementia-like effects, lower thyroid function, decrease mental acuity, increase depression, cause weight gain, diminish bone strength, increase bone fractures, and increase cancer risks. It sounds kind of like this new pharmaceutical they've released where they say, oh, you can take this and eat any food you're allergic to, but look out for liver failure, cancer, death, brain swelling, all this stuff. When in my mind, the simplest thing to do if you have a sensitivity to a food is don't eat that food. Like, well, why put yourself on a chemical substance that can cause all these problems just so that you can eat something that your body is allergic to? That's not vitalistic. That's not even good medicine. Natick, Massachusetts, in 1997, they conducted a study because there was enough interest from the citizens saying, do we need fluoride in our water? Should we fluoridate our water? Or should we just get it out of there since it can cause so many problems? And the study was conducted by the US Army Research, a microbiologist, an environmental chemist, and a former Apollo program project scientist and a molecular biologist. And they did this study for the city of Natick, Mass. And they found that the fluoridation in the water increases fluorosis in children by about 6%, which it's a serious dental disease. It adversely affects the central nervous system, and it can cause behavioral changes and cognitive deficits. It's a developmental neurotoxin. It affects the nervous system of a developing fetus at doses that are not toxic to the mother. It may be positively correlated with increased hip fracture rates in persons over 65. It has a negative impact on human reproduction, and they cited at the time an epidemiological study showing a correlation between decreasing annual fertility rates and increasing levels of fluoride in drinking water. There are many studies linking it to cancer. It's a negatively charged molecule. It's very sticky. And it inhibits and alters the actions of a long list of enzymes that our body needs for proper metabolism, growth, and cell regulation. Okay, what happens? And we're just about done with fluoride. Well, after reviewing the report, the city council decided the health benefits of fluoride did not outweigh the health risks, and they took it out of the water. Many, many, many places have followed suit. Now, it is definitely, you should, if you're concerned at all, check it out. You can go fluoride free easily. Okay, what's the other thing in our water? I said I was going to talk about pharmaceutical compounds. So many of the new emerging contaminants are endocrine disrupting compounds. And the endocrine system in the body includes the thyroid, the adrenals, and the reproductive glands, among others. And there are many, many, many experts that worry that there are potential drug interactions possible from this type of contamination, and that long-term low-level exposure poses a serious risk to the health of humans. And unfortunately, right, people aren't necessarily monitoring this or regulating this. And there are many types of pharmaceuticals that have been found in our water supply. People are testing, people like me. And if you are still listening to my podcast here on whatever episode we're at, 10 or so, then you care too. I know you do. And what are they finding? They're finding antibiotics, anticonvulsants, antidepressants, asthma medications, cholesterol medications, heart medications, pain, sex hormones, tranquilizers. And in addition to the pharmaceuticals, there's other industrial chemicals making their way into our water supply, like from lotions and creams and colognes and deodorants and cosmetics and personal hygiene items. The chemical compounds found in pharmaceutical and personal care products are showing up in our nation's rivers, lakes, groundwater, and drinking water, even remote regions of national parks. Up to 80% of streams in the US are contaminated with chemicals, including pharmaceuticals, according to the US Geological Survey. I'm not making this stuff up. People are doing their jobs in these agencies and departments and reporting it, but no one's doing anything about it. So we have to do something about it ourselves at home and work, individually. The sheer volume of different persistent compounds found in the environment complicates the regulation and remediation of them. And if you hop over to the Cary Institute, C-A-R-Y, Cary Institute, they talk a lot about this. The highest concentrations in wastewater, which some places are trying to clean wastewater and recycle it, areas where they don't have enough water, include NSAIDs, so non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, beta blockers, psychoactive compounds, analgesics, those are pain killers, antibiotics, endocrine disruptors, antiretroviral drugs, and cancer drugs. And this is work that was done in 2006, 2010, and 2017 by several different researchers. So I'm not trying to be a downer. And when I was in medical school, I had a teacher. His name was Walter Crinion, Dr. Walter Crinion. He had a radio show in the Northwest. He wrote a couple of books. He was the world authority. He was the leading authority in the world on contaminants in our environment. And we had a class, and after class, I was just kind of sitting there stunned, thinking, oh man, what's the purpose of doing anything? I'm completely surrounded by all these toxins and all this poison. And he came, everyone else had left, and he came down from the front of the classroom, and he sat down at the bench next to me, and he said, Eli, what's the long face for? And I said, dude, I don't want to breathe. I don't want to drink. I don't want to eat. Like, I am inundated by these thoughts of all these toxins being around me and going into me. And man, I got to figure out what to do. And he said, that's okay. Right now I'm setting the stage for all the things we need to be aware of. And then we're going to talk about, what you can do to be your safest. And he did. And I felt better. But I can imagine if I'm sitting here talking to you about this, if it's really sinking into you that breathing anything, drinking anything, eating anything out there that you haven't taken the time to clean up as much as possible, it's like you're out there walking in a poison time bomb. And that's how I felt when I first started learning about this in medical school. So you might be thinking the best thing to do is just buy bottled water. But as I mentioned, that's not necessarily a good idea. It depends on where you're getting it, what it's contained within. Americans drink, here's this for my brainstorm in Germany back in the late 1980s. Americans now drink an average of 9 billion gallons of bottled water each year. Is that a kicker? And why? Because it's easy to carry. They think it's clean. They think it's a higher quality than tap water. It's filtered, all this stuff. The EWG, the Environmental Working Group, showed that the 10 best-selling brands of bottled water contained around 38 contaminants. So it is better than tap water, but there's still contamination in there. It included bacteria, fertilizer, and industrial chemicals. In some cases, the contaminants were similar to those allowed in tap water. And it's really interesting that for some of the bottled water companies, the source of their water is a municipal water source, even if the label reads purified. How about that? If purified water is simply filtered tap water, it can be confusing when we're reading the labels of water bottles. So here are some tips. If the water is labeled spring water, the original source is from an underground water spring, and that's most likely piped to a bottling plant for packaging. That's what that means. The water where it's coming from still, you'd still want to find out how clean that was testing or not. If it's labeled mineral water, the original source is also from an underground source, and it has to contain at least 250 parts per million of total dissolved solids, like sulfur, salt, compounds, and different gases. A person or a company that bottles and uses mineral water on their label cannot add minerals, but they have found that some of those companies do. If it is artisan water, artisan well water, it has to come from a well that taps a confined aquifer. And purified water, we've already talked about, it's tap water that's been filtered. Bottom line, almost all bottled water fail to meet the standards safe enough to consume on a regular basis. So tap water is regulated by the EPA, but it's only regulated for certain things. They have to produce yearly reports identifying the contaminants in local water sources. The bottled water is regulated by the FDA, which has no such requirement and publishes no such report. In general, our municipal tap water, so what comes into our houses, is tested daily. In large cities, it's tested hourly. And the standards for water quality set by the EPA is much higher for tap water than those set by the FDA for bottled water. The FDA doesn't require the water to be tested for parasites. And this includes parasites like Cryptosporidium or Giardia. The EPA does require this testing for tap water. Also, the FDA allows for some fecal contamination in bottled water, like E. coli or other fecal coliforms. Despite that the FDA does not maintain strict rules on the bottled water, doesn't mean the tap water is a better alternative. As we've already talked about, we already know that there's other things in the water that nobody's looking at and are not regulated, like the pharmaceuticals, sex hormones, industrial chemicals, things like that. And they just don't have standards for these types of contaminants. I talked to you already about the bisphenol A or BPA that can leach from plastic bottles. That was a Harvard study that was done. The National Toxicology Program knows that BPA can affect the brain, behavior, and prostate gland in fetuses, infants, and children, but there's a lack of human clinical studies, so we don't know the full extent of BPA. So BPA kind of tricks the body into thinking it's hormone, and so that's we can make the jump. Let's make the jump that it affects the endocrine system. If it acts like a hormone, it can affect the endocrine system. So bottom line is the quality of tap water does vary by city, just like bottled water varies by distributor. Just put a little bit of research into what you're drinking and what you're drinking from, and get your city's annual quality water report. You can also get your water tested. There's independent labs that will test and tell you everything that they test for that's in your water. But bottom line, what does it mean and what do I do with my people? Well, I have them filter their water. filter water. That's the best thing that you can do. And then you carry it in your own container. So most people, because they don't know very much about the quality of the water they use, even people that recognize potential health risk in tap water, sometimes we choose cost effectiveness and convenience over superior quality. It just happens. So what are the different ways that you can filter your water? So before you purchase a filtration system, understand what your water has in it so you know what you need to filter out. It's usually a consumer confidence report that your water utility is producing. You're supposed to get that every year by July from all municipalities in the US, but I don't think they all send that out. It's also supposed to tell you where your drinking water is coming from, what contaminants have been found, and how those levels compare to national standards. Have your water tested by a state certified lab. They're listed everywhere. It's pretty easy to find it. And that will identify the problems for you. And then you'll know if you can use a general filtration system to get most of it out, or if you're going to have to purchase something that's more specific. So here are the different types of filters: countertop personal use filters. These are placed in a pitcher or water bottle. You can get some that are like used for camping and they can filter out bacteria and things like that. Point of entry filters are installed at the main water line to your home, to a faucet, to your hoses. Ion exchange filters, also known as water softeners, remove dissolved salts and other minerals. You can get granular carbon or carbon block filters. These use a chemical or physical bonding process that pulls contaminants to the surface of the water. These are really good for removing organic chemicals like herbicides, pesticides, and industrial chemicals. Loose material can form that can trap water, which escapes proper filtering. So there's some maintenance and upkeep you have to do with these type of filters. Reverse osmosis forces water through a membrane that draws out organic and inorganic contaminants. It uses 3 times as much water as is treated, but it's the most effective in eliminating all disease-causing organisms and most chemical contaminants. You lose minerals during reverse osmosis, so you have to add trace minerals back to the water or take a trace mineral supplement, which most folks who've come into me who are already using RO systems aren't doing the trace minerals. And I'm going to have an entire episode on that. Alkaline water systems, you probably hear a lot about that. There's a few health scientists that propose alkaline water can neutralize acid in the body and that's good for health. So there's that system. Activated carbon filters. These are common in the countertop and faucet under the sink. We use one of these. It's called Zero Filtration System. And we have 2 pitchers and we go through about 1 filter every 2 months. You can distill your water. It collects purified steam. Again, you would have to put trace minerals back in, and then ionized water has been separated into acidic and alkaline components. So that's like a Kangen water would be very one of the best known ones of that. When you just remember to remineralize, and Zero is what we use because it's easy. Hydrogen water, some people ask me about this. Hydrogen water has been infused with hydrogen gas. Preliminary studies show this can be helpful for increased exercise capacity, physical endurance, liver function, a whole bunch of things. I don't find the mechanism of action to be very well explained, and there are not a lot of studies, but it does seem relatively safe. It loses hydrogen quickly, so it's supposed to be consumed within a short period of time of being infused. And then structured water is water that's been exposed to various forms of energy, such as magnetic fields, sunlight. This has been known and studied for like over 20 years in modern science. And benefits that have been observed include increased growth, reduced markers of oxidative stress, improve blood lipids, blood fats, things like that. So that is my internal water episode for today. I know this is a long one, but hey, sometimes I do 15 or 20-minute episodes. So now what I'd like to talk to you about briefly is the external use of water. And in naturopathic medicine, we call this hydrotherapy. And it's important to me, and one of the reasons why I'm doing Vital Wisdom Podcast, to help people learn how to become their own doctor. And by learning how to be your own doctor for yourself and for your family, you really are going to find freedom from a corrupt and failing system. Now, it doesn't mean I don't think you shouldn't have a naturopathic doctor or a chiropractic doctor or some other holistic health practitioner practicing from the vitalistic paradigm on your team, because sometimes we need a doctor. But most of the time we can do this ourselves, and people don't realize that, right? I do believe in the wondrous ability of mainstream medicine to handle life-threatening emergencies. This is where they excel. That should be called emergency medicine. And everything else, in my humble opinion, needs to be handled by the folks who understand how to restore health to the body so the body can continue to self-heal itself. And there's a time and place for true emergency care. But today, in this day and age, many people call a doctor for things they can do themselves. And when you learn to be your own family doctor, you learn how to create and maintain health. And with health, there's really not that much to treat, right? Other than acute emergency, accidents and wounds and things like that. Remember, I say this, and I hope I say this every episode, when the body has what it needs, it's not toxic, and it receives assistance with its healing attempts, the body heals. It's that easy. It's how we were created, designed, evolved, or accidentally arrived here. I don't know, whatever you believe. The truth of it is we can heal. We can heal cardiovascular, we can heal joints, we can heal, our bodies can heal. And it's doing this every second of the day, and we can either help it or hinder it. So how do we help the body heal? Well, of course, the basics. And I've talked about those, and I'll keep talking about those. Dr. Lindlahr is one of the early nature cure practitioners. He taught that the quality of the lymph and blood are of the utmost importance to a strong healing ability. And I find that they're often overlooked by both patient and doctor. And so one of the ways that we can improve the composition of the blood in the lymph is through this modality called hydrotherapy. And it is one of the deepest acting treatments to stimulate the body's ability to do its own restoration more effectively. It's very low tech, but high powered in its ability to support our health. And why is that? Well, water is plastic. If you've ever heard of Dr. Masaru Emoto, he wrote a book called The Hidden Messages in Water. It's so worth finding this at the library or just buy a copy of it, right? So what does that mean? Plasticity. Water takes and holds information and shapes itself accordingly, right? So it is not only the physical form that water takes, but the thoughts of those around the water. So plasticity has not just to do with the physical form that the water's in contact with, it has to do with the information that water can pick up. And Emoto's great gift was to expose water to different thought forms and then to freeze and analyze the crystalline structure. And this is just a fascinating read, and it shows how we can have a direct influence on the water that we're taking into our body and that we're using. So it also is imprintable. The water element has cycled and touched everything on the planet, and it leaves an imprint in the molecular structure of the water. Viktor Schauberger was a naturalist and a forester in the early 20th century, and he was a great observer of nature. And he watched the streams in the forest that he was responsible for, and he started to discover that water moved through streams that have curving snake-like motions where there were swirls and eddies. And that water was alive in a different way, and the hydrodynamics were different. Waters at certain water at certain temperatures, having gone through these certain movements, could lift rocks in the bottom of the stream bed and swirl them around far beyond what we could understand in physics at the time. Schauberger began to realize that these movements revitalized water in a profound way. And then Rudolf Steiner put a lot of work into working with water to revitalize water and developed work he called flow forms. So when we put water into tubes or canals where it's running straight, the water loses vitality. When we put it through curves and it creates spirals and it keeps the water energetically alive. And the other, and for the rest of it's important for this episode of Vital Wisdom, water conducts heat and cold. So it's very important. Like I said, we're up to 70 to 72% water. There's a lot of historical use of water. I'm going to skip over that because this episode is getting long. And instead, I want to talk about the hydrotherapy at home. So there's a few things. Alternating hot and cold is one. A wet sheet treatment, warming socks treatment, constitutional hydrotherapy. And if you want to have a really good resource for the use for hydrotherapy at home, I would get the book called Lectures in Naturopathic Hydrotherapy. It was written by doctors Wade Boyle and Andre Saine. They're also naturopathic physicians. So when you use cold water on the body, it stimulates, and then a short cold stimulates the metabolism, and a long cold depresses circulation and metabolism. So you put ice on for a few minutes or a cold rag, you're going to stimulate, and you put it on for a long time, and it's really going to slow things down. But right, cold blood, think about when things become cold, things slow down. When we're talking short-term cold, we're talking about up to a minute or so. It increases circulation in an area, but if you leave that cold on or leave it immersed beyond that minute, you actually get less circulation because it depresses circulation. That's what that means. So a minute or less, sometimes I go up to 2 minutes. And with my patients, it just depends on what we're treating and what we're doing. This is good. It reduces swelling in the area. But for tissue healing, you really don't want to leave cold on that long, which is why we should not be putting ice on for 15 or 20 minutes to an injury. Heat. Hot water therapy up to 5 minutes, there's an increase in circulation and how quickly metabolism is happening in the area. Short, hot, right? Stimulates circulation, metabolism. Long heat depresses. So for this first therapy we call alternating heat and cold, it's a great thing to do when you have had an injury to an area, a torn ligament, a sprain, a strain. If you just have pain somewhere, this is really good. And what do we do? So you want to have a bin of hot water and a bin of cold water. And the greater the contrast between the two bins, the better outcome you're going to have. And if you just do it once, you'll get some benefit. I usually do it 3 times. So what do? I have someone put a hot rag, right? I'm just using a face cloth or a really thin towel for 5 minutes. And then I'm having them swap that with a cold towel for a minute. And I do that 3 times in a row. And what the best things that we see, you don't want to burn the skin, you don't want to freeze the skin. It's as hot as can be tolerated and as cold as can be tolerated. But the bigger the difference, the better. So it increases circulation, it reduces pain, it speeds healing. And you could do this for chronic sinus inflammation or infection. You can do it for a sprain, you can do it for a contusion, fractures. You want to do it on the opposite limb. If you have a broken arm, do it on the other arm. You do on the opposite limb. If you're feeling a little run down, sinus infection, sprained joint, broken bone, all that stuff. If you have a headache, you can do this as a foot bath. So that is one really easy thing that you can do at home. Hydrotherapy. The other one that I use frequently at home with folks is a heating compress. It's a wet sheet. This increases red and white blood cell count. It can break a fever, but remember, we'll have a whole episode on fever. Fever is good. It's the body's way to do to heal itself. So typically, what you want to do is use this for the onset of cold or flu, fever, detox support, etc. And so what I do is I have someone take a sheet or a pillowcase and get it wet in cold water, wring it out really, really, really well. Put 2 blankets down on a bed or a sofa. If you've got a wool blanket, that's the best. Take a hot bath or shower to warm up, and then you dry off, you lay down on the blankets, you put the sheet on top of your chest, wrap up with the blankets, and then you stay there until you warm that up. So historically, they would wrap up in the wet sheet completely. I have found that I get not very good compliance from people with that, but they're okay to lay that wet sheet or that wet pillowcase on their back or on their tummy. The last one I'm going to tell you about today is called the wet socks, or many of my kiddos call it the magic socks. And it can sound kind of scary, but it's really not. Now, what does it do? It increases red and white blood cell. It reduces congestion in the upper body. It speeds resolution of respiratory infections. You do this at night right before bed. You could use it for colds and bronchitis, any respiratory infection, low red or white blood cell counts like anemia, chemo, post-infection, feeling on the edge of getting sick, poor circulation in the feet and the limbs. So what do? So right before bed, you want to soak and wring out really well, ankle high, crew length, thin cotton socks and cold tap water. Don't use knee highs. Cotton is important. If the feet are cold, soak them in a hot foot bath first, or warm in a hot shower or bath. So you want your feet warm. You get in bed, you put the cold socks on, pull wool socks over them, or very heavy, thick socks, and go to sleep. Wool is important because it insulates, even if the feet are cold and wet, the wool insulates and holds the body's warmth. So the body is able to warm and dry the socks, which is what it will do. If you're worried about getting the mattress wet, you can put a towel on the bed where the feet are resting, but it's wool that insulates. So you shouldn't have major soaking of the mattress. Most of the time, 99% of the time, you wake up in the morning, the feet are dry. Sometimes people wake up in the middle of the night, the socks are dry. If they're dry in the middle of the night, go ahead and take them off. Initially, there's going to be a rush of blood into the feet to warm the feet. And as the feet warm, the blood flushes back. And as the feet cool, the blood flushes in. And so this flushing back and forth is what stimulates the red and white blood cell production and pulls congestion from the upper body. So there is a therapy called constitutional hydrotherapy, which I think I'd like to do another episode on that all by itself. And because we've gone so long, I'm not necessarily going to go over a case with you today, and I've given you some good therapies there. Please remember this: your body has the ability to heal itself. You have to give it what it needs. You have to nurture it, you have to feed it, you have to love it, you have to exercise it, stretch it, breathe, smile inside at yourself. Give yourself an inside smile. Be gentle with yourself. Many of us did not learn this growing up. And as adults, we were starting to figure out, hey, wait a minute. Isn't there something more to finding my own personal level of optimal health? And there is. You do not have to be dependent on a lifetime of drugs and surgeries and feeling poorly. You don't have to. It's a journey. Take it step by step. And I thank you for joining me on Vital Wisdom today. And I'll talk to you next week.